am super excited to be talking to Amelia today for a few reasons. Amelia has also worked with the Busy Mums for many years now. And obviously, she is my cousin too. But mainly because today we're going to talk about something I know that affects so many mums out there. And we really want to be making sure that we give the mums the right advice, or just have a starting point of actually understanding what perimenopause is. But I want to introduce Amelia, and I want to do it properly as well. But Amelia is a degreed qualified naturopath, a medical herbalist, and has advanced training in natural fertility in New Zealand. And she's also under mentorship with Dr. Lara Brydon, which I think is really special. Lara's got some incredible books out there, which I definitely think those out there should purchase. And today we are talking about perimenopause. And for me, it was quite a new word. Like, in the end, I knew what menopause was. But perimenopause was something that I, even personally only really started to hear about in the last 5 years. And then obviously went and did, my own education last year when I turned 40. And, it's a real thing, isn't it?
Totally. And I think that's so good to frame it like that, Cal, because, I have friends in their late 30s and their early 40s, and they're like, oh, whatever, this isn't relevant for me. Like, I don't need to worry about this. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, but, you're kind of ticking off the list of a lot of symptoms that I know that you're experiencing, which is very much perimenopause related. And I mean, we'll go on to talk about this, but again, I think there's this lack of knowledge or lack of understanding that people think that perimenopause means aging, and we're all aging. It doesn't, but it doesn't mean that we've just suddenly accelerated aging as we move into our 40s. So I think I really want to make that very clear, because I feel like there's a lot of shame that goes with, when you go and see your doctor and they start talking to you, oh, these might be perimenopausal symptoms. And then, I think there tends to be this sort of like level of shame, which I just don't need to be there. And I think that's really important too.
Yeah, and I think it's probably because the age, I'm 41 now. I don't feel it, but, there are changes, that I feel, especially with regards to my hormones. And obviously I get my blood work done, every 6 months. So I do get to know my own body. But, these symptoms, I guess, can also start even before the age of 40. So that was one of the first questions I guess I had for you was, when do we expect to, I guess, experience this, and I guess a little bit more detail around the timing of it, and is it 5 years before, is it 10 years before? Like, what is the timing of this compared to perimenopause and menopause?
Yeah, sure. So I think we just need to start with like, what is perimenopause? I think that's like a really good starting point. So I like to say that perimenopause is a transition phase before menopause, with menopause being when you have your final period. And you kind of can't diagnose that till there's been 12 months of no periods. Okay, so it's kind of like a state, if that makes sense. Whereas perimenopause is what I would say is the time leading up to that final event of menopause, or that final period. And it is really a stage where your hormones are in constant flux. And, Dr. Lara Brydon talks to me about, like, this is really a time where estrogen goes on a roller coaster ride. It can go to 3 times higher than it kind of previously was. It's much like what can happen, that tumultuous time that happens in puberty. And then it can kind of crash back down, and it can swing back up and crash back down. And it can do this month after month after month. So
sounds wonderful.
Exactly. And at the same time, like, you have this, slow exiting of progesterone from the theme park, right? And actually, theme park, like, progesterone could be like your best friend at this point. It could really help to calm that kind of the nervous system. So I think, again, that's really important, that so often we're hearing about perimenopause as a time where there's estrogen deficiency. from my lens, I see this as a time where it's more of a tumultuous kind of turbulent roller coaster ride. And it's a time that actually we need progesterone as well. And progesterone can really lend a hand. So going back to, when do I start to see these things happen? It's typically like 2 to 10 years before that final period. So typically we see women, sort of the average age is around 45 to 55. So if you're thinking about when you might start seeing symptoms again, that could be someone as young as their mid-30s. So that's something like some of, I've got friends that are younger than me, I've got friends that are older than me, but a lot of those younger ones are like, oh, there's no way like that this is happening. I'm like, yes, no, this could be very relevant for you. So that's kind of the average age. It's also often predicated by sort of a genetic component. So the age that your mother went through menopause and perimenopause can give you some indication as to when that might arrive for you. But really, I start to see from your late 30s, that's when that estrogen starts to really fluctuate. And, that's when you can see those symptoms of actually high estrogen. And they're things like breast pain. We start to see heavier periods. We see like an increase in menstrual cramps, that irritability. And sometimes I see things, and this is probably something for a whole other day, but mast cell activation or a histamine intolerance. And so they're kind of like the high estrogen symptoms, if we imagine we're at the top of the roller coaster ride. And then at the bottom, you see things like an estrogen deficiency, which is more sort of a lot of what, kind of the more medicalized approach are sort of doing things like giving hormonal therapy for estrogen deficiencies, and you'll see things like depression or weight gain, hot flushes or night sweats. So they're kind of like the estrogen type symptoms. And then you also have, like I said, those more progesterone deficiency type symptoms. So when that progesterone is kind of sneaking away, it could have really buffered the effects of those higher estrogens as well. So that's where I see things like, I guess things like breast pain, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety.
I was going to say, like, I mean, I know from friends as well, and even, personal experience, do you, and also clients, they say to me, suddenly I'm not handling the stress like the way that I was, before my period. I feel like I'm this angry mess, the anxiety seems to, and I mean, I don't even know if this is, even symptoms of ADHD or, I guess, I've had friends who have felt that way, not necessarily being diagnosed, but is that something that you, I guess in clinic that, you see more of as well?
Yeah, and I think the thing is with progesterone is, you only make that hormone after ovulation. Like, whereas estrogen is like the lead up to ovulation, whereas you have to have an ovulatory cycle to make progesterone. And I think that's kind of really key. So when we're in our 40s, we might be at the top of our careers, we might be juggling motherhood, we might be juggling like there's a lot of dynamics at play, right? And so to make progesterone and to ovulate, it takes a lot of resources. And I think I've talked to you about many things, and it requires a lot from your body to make progesterone. There's like zinc, there's iodine, there's vitamin D. And so when we're stressed, often what I see is our body just, instead of going down like that biochemical pathway from pregnenolone to progesterone, it kind of robs it all and makes cortisol and makes stress hormone. So
and is this why suddenly women in their 40s suddenly gain more weight? What I've seen it is a lot of women is say, Kelly, I got to a certain age and I've, added 5, 10, 15, but don't get me wrong, like their nutrition hasn't been ideal or the kind of training, but why is it that during that time women can potentially gain more weight? Is there something, is that to do with the progesterone and the high cortisol or the gut health?
I think, it's a multi-pronged and a multifaceted like reasons why that happens. One of the key reasons I actually see clinically is to do with like that insulin sensitivity
Right.
and insulin resistance. And that's because maintaining a good level of estrogen and progesterone has a sense like helps to promote insulin sensitivity. So when we've got that kind of roller coaster or that deficiency, again, that's going to make you more susceptible to not eating as well and your diet not being on point, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, if you already had a predisposition to go down that pathway, it kind of gets exacerbated at this time.
So if, say, for example, they were used to drinking coffee, the wine, they had a lot more, I guess, flour or white sugar-based foods, and then suddenly they go through this roller coaster of hormones, their body gets a lot more sensitive to the insulin, then this is, you know, what their body was in their 30s is different from their 40s, and they haven't got that, I guess, that base level. And is this also, does muscle play a part? Like I know from 40 onwards, we start to lose muscle as well. Does, you know, and I also know a lot of women undereat protein. Does that, the way the body is from like, I guess, a fitness point of view, make a difference during that time as well?
Yeah, so I think, you know, kind of key strategies that we need to look at in terms of assisting with weight loss and assisting with health and assisting with fitness is, again, like make sure that we're looking at that insulin sensitivity picture.
Right. Okay.
So, like what that goes back to is protein, you know, making sure that we're eating enough protein. I know that you're really good and you're really big on this with your program, but I just can't like bang on enough about it. Like people need to get protein at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. People tend to do quite a good job at dinner, but you know, so often they're like dropping their kids off and they're eating a piece of toast on the way in the car, or they're just grabbing coffee, and that's just not going to be enough. So I typically look at and any of my clients listening to this are just going to laugh, but I'm looking at like 20 to 30 grams net of protein. It's quite a lot of protein. So that looks something like, that's not, you know, just for reference, one egg is like 7 grams, 6 or 7 grams. So when we're talking about what those protein requirements, that's like having a protein smoothie with a boiled egg on the side, or that's having like sheep's yogurt. I'm a big fan of kind of that more A2 casein that I find is cheaper and things. And so, you know, maybe that sheep's yogurt with some protein powder, with some hemp seeds, which are, again, 2 tablespoons of hemp seeds are going to provide you with about as much as an egg.
Wow.
And with some berries and things mixed in. And so that's going to really set you up for the day. Or like a 3 egg omelette again, and then you're having other sources of like nuts and seeds in that. And I think this also has a flow-on effect to later in the day too, where you're going to find like that emotional resiliency is going to be better placed, right? Like,
and you're going to feel fuller for longer. I mean, a lot of women, you know, I was talking about this the other day, you know, they snack here and here, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, you know, they get to the end of the day, the kids come home, they're having, you know, snacks, whereas they haven't actually had, you know, a full protein-based meal or the protein at lunch. And, you know, my clients who've got to the end of the program, they've realized, you know, when they're eating the right, you know, I guess, you know, the right foods, they don't crave as much, you know, and I think it's not rocket science. It's just, I think I blame society and it being, you know, how we've lived, you know, out of packets probably for the last 20 years, and cereal and, you know, lots of processed foods, and people overdo it.
Became like, you know, if you're a kid of the 80s, I think that it was all pretty exciting to get stuff out of a packet.
Oh, exactly. You know, my dad was the manager of sanitarium. So, you know, we were living on cereal when we were younger. It was the exciting thing to get and I was just, get the stickers out of the packets. It was what we did. But now we realize we need to move away from the packets.
Just real food, you know, and this, like, I think sometimes people come to me expecting, I don't know, like that I've got some magical formula, which I do think, you know, I've got plenty of tools in the toolkit, but you know, sometimes what I say is really boring. Like, it's just,
well, it's so normal, like it's a logical approach. And unfortunately these days, You know, we also have become accustomed to being promised the world within 7 days, you know, with the magic, you know, shakes, the magic, you know, 500 calorie diets that don't work. So, you know, but when you go back to normal actually works. I want to talk,
you know, as
sorry?
well. And consistency. I think
Yeah,
this is
100%.
really
Yeah.
just, and it's a matter of just making, you know, making that consistent, like, practice makes perfect, right? So it's like, okay, if you fall off the bandwagon and things, and you don't have to have a perfect diet. It's just making these things your default position.
Yeah.
I think that's really key as well.
Yeah. Well, you're not going to change your life until you change your daily routine as a mother. So it's looking within habits within the madness, and not denying the madness, but also, you know, being able to have those solid non-negotiables. And, you know, and this actually leads me on to something that I wanted to talk about. You know, life isn't perfect being you know, a working mum, a mum in general, a mum, but how does stress and sleep affect us in our 40s or, you know, perimenopause? Is that something that we also have to really be aware of? Because I've seen it with clients. They just, you know, may feel more stress, which in turn, I guess, is going to increase our cortisol, which affects, I guess, the, you know, that side of it. But is it even more so important in our 40s to concentrate on, I guess, lifestyle factors?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, you know, when you go back to stress, and, you know, stress then affects sleep, and then sleep, not getting enough sleep is going to exacerbate that, that kind of insulin resistance picture. So I think focusing on sleep is, you know, again, boring advice, but it's kind of really key. And so I really do stress the importance of having a good night's sleep. I mean, this can be challenging depending on how old, you know, your children are, but I think you can do your best to kind of make good sleep hygiene habits. And I know I'm still, you know, trying to improve those. But the things that
when you've got young kids, it's a challenge. I don't think my kids slept through till they were 5 years old, so don't come to me for that advice.
Yeah,
but I'm a nana now. I'm in bed by 8:30 every night, so I've spent all the years not sleeping, so right now I'm in a position where I can sleep, so I utilize it. So
yeah, I don't feel like that is the thing. Like, what can you control as a mum? Even in, you know, this is relevant for even those people in those early days. I think, you know, I used to do that too. When my kids were really young and it was really unpredictable about what things looked like, that was just going to bed earlier because I knew that I could get a few hours in before midnight, before that first wake up. And I did have to prioritize that. So I guess, yeah, going back to that, sleep is definitely important. Things we can do to really help to improve our circadian rhythm, because again, that's going to help our insulin picture. So, you know, getting up, getting morning sunlight, that's really important for improving that. The other things are making sure that you're kind of sticking to that good sleep wake window. So making sure that you're getting up around the same time every day, and then you're going to sleep around the same time every day. That we are doing things like regular meals, because that actually helps our internal body clock as well. So, you know, having breakfast, lunch, and dinner are roughly at the same time, that will help assist with that. And then other things, again, you know, just the things like that we know, like screens, cell phones, all of those things are going to really inhibit your melatonin. And so whether that's wearing like blue blocker glasses, or you've downloaded, I think I've talked about this in the past, but the iFlux app that you can put on your computer, and also downloading another app. I can't remember. I've got one on my phone that goes over and above even the phone settings, because I find that, they're not enough in itself. Like, just some of the phone settings.
That's really interesting.
I use that as well, so that kind of puts on that more like calmer light, red light and things in the background as well. So that's kind of really important. What else were you
well, the biggest thing for me is that when I, you know, obviously I you know, work with women every day, and they say to me, oh, like, I think because they assume as soon as they're 41, 42, 43, they've gained weight, they're like, oh, I'm assuming that I'm just in perimenopause and it's happening. Now, they assume that because they've gained weight, and they obviously don't have the understanding of what's going on in their body. So how do we test for it? Like, what is the testing that we would do? And obviously we have to be careful, because we can't say to everyone here, this supplement is going to fix it. But, you know, what would be, I guess, some great support for these ladies. But, you know, how do we become factual of this perimenopause within our body? And do we even label it, or do we just say, you know, for me, I don't like labeling. I like to kind of, I guess, you know, I'm aging gracefully the best way I can, you know, like, is this part of it? Can I prevent it? I'd rather be in a position where I can prevent and know my own body. And I think that's going to be the key to everyone's success, is know your own body. But how do we do that, Amelia?
Okay, I think, you know, perimenopause and menopause, you know, is inescapable. Like, that is just a natural event that will occur. What I would reframe is that it doesn't have to be this awful roller coaster ride. Like, there are tools that we have in our toolkit to assist to make that transition slightly easier, whether that is, you know, a natural medicine approach, or whether that is even, you know, and we can talk about this, but whether that is also hormone therapy and the guidance with your GP or gynecologist. But in terms of like testing for it, it is tricky. Menopause, you can test. Menopause is, again, that's like that final period, and what you see is 2 to 3 consecutive high FSH readings done 1 month apart from each other. And when I say high, that is greater than the FSH reading is done comes back greater than 40. So that is kind of the hallmark sign for menopause. In terms of knowing the perimenopause, when it's at that later stage, again, you can test FSH and kind of just see what's happening with your FSH. You can sometimes look at progesterone and see, you know, is that really low during this time? Was it in an ovulatory cycle? And an ovulatory cycle, again, that can give a little bit of an indication. Testing your AMH, which is your ovarian reserve, again, some indication, but it's not an exact science. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway, is perimenopause is not an exact science. So what I was always trained to do is to look at the individual and look at their symptoms. So I've actually made a few notes on that, because I thought that was really important. But Professor Geraldine Pryor and Dr. Lara Bryden kind of said that if you experience 3 of these kind of common symptoms, and that's really indicative of the fact that you're going through perimenopause. So I thought I might just run through that.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Thank you.
So if you're experiencing 3 of the following things, this is kind of key. So one would be that new onset heavy periods or a longer flow. So again, that could be because that estrogen is higher, it's kind of causing that heavier period. And again, we might not be having that buffering effects of progesterone, which will help to kind of thin the uterine lining. The other thing is less than 26-day cycles, or a shorter, like maybe 26 was your average, and now you've gone down to 24 or 23. So you're having shorter menstrual cycles. That would be also another sign. New swollen, like lumpy breasts, or a lot of breast tenderness. The one that I see that's probably really subtle, but it's probably the most common one I see for especially those early perimenopause symptoms, is that mid-cycle waking with sleep. So it might be that you used to sleep all night long, and now suddenly you're just waking up and you've got some insomnia. That is a real subtle, I think.
The pretend baby in the house is waking up.
Yeah, exactly. You're like on a 3-hour loop. You're like, it's going to, start waking up soon. The other thing is an increase in menstrual cramps. Again, that could be because there's heavier flow, and new or increased level of migraine headaches. That is such a big one. And yeah, I know we've talked about that.
I know. I'm listening to this now thinking, oh gosh, I mean, migraines are the worst. I've had them for 4 years around my cycle. So hopefully that doesn't mean that I've been in it. But yeah, migraines, I have many clients who say the same thing, and they are, you know,
and
they're
then
not.
we come back to, and I think we've discussed this a little bit in the past, you know, mast cell activation, or that histamine,
which is exactly the same thing that I've, you know, on a personal level experience as well with the low progesterone. So it's just amazing, like hearing it and thinking, okay, well, you know, but for me, I'm also, okay, well, you know, how do we support that, you know, like once again, and I'm sure that's something that, you know, that's what is the next stage, is aware of it, but then being able to support it with the right supplements or right gut support, or
exactly. Like, you've got to work out, I mean, that is such a, you know, a big, and again, that's such a big topic in itself, but there are certain strategies that I definitely would utilize helping with mast cell. But then the other signs are things like, you know, that premenstrual mood swings that we have, that, you know, kind of crazy.
It would be great if it just went the other way. We just got so extremely happy.
I think that does, you know, and I think also I want to lead in with that too, is, you know, talking to Lara, who's kind of gone through that now, and, you know, she said to me, you know, it's great, and also, you know, actually menopausal women are found to be, you know, in their 70s, I mean, when we're looking at later on, you know, are some of the happiest people, like when they've done happiness scales and they've looked at that. And I don't know, it's kind of like they're just badass by the time they get to that stage. I think
they've gone through all the symptoms to realize what it's like to feel happy, so they just concentrate on it. Absolutely.
I think that's, and I do see that in like my extended family, that a lot of the women in their 60s and 70s, I feel like they're actually the happiest they've ever been in their life. And, you know, let's look to that and let's celebrate that, because isn't that cool? And also, you know, let's not like lose sight of aging as a bloody privilege. Like, there are some people
exactly,
you know, there are some people who don't get to do that, and that I feel like is so important, you know, that we, instead of just concentrating on the fact that we need Botox or whatever.
Well, I'm going to swear here, or not swear, and hopefully I can, but I'm not going to, but I like the mindset, like when I turned 40 last year, and you know, I went away with 5 of my girlfriends, and for me it was like quite a big thing. I think mentally, because I remember Dad being 40 and I thought he was really, really old, you know. And you know, something that always switches me is that I just want to be fit, fabulous, and effing amazing in my 40s. And every day I wake up, I have that energy, because I also deal with clients who feel as though that they're really old in their 40s, and that, you know, they're certainly in perimenopause, or they're in menopause, and they've got this energy about them. I'm like, no, fit, fabulous, and amazing in your 40s, you know. And it is hard. Like, you know, I suffer from a lot of the stuff that, you know, you talk about. You know, even my partner, he says to me, I know when you're due. I'm like, how do you mean? You know, because of the way that I, you know, might be affected beforehand. So, you know, I guess right now, you know, to be aware is the number one thing. Educate ourselves. You know, number 2, to be under the guidance of someone like yourself, because then we're able to know our deficiencies, know where our hormone levels are at, be aware of our lifestyle factors, be aware of how we train our body. Obviously, maintaining muscle is so important, the right nutrition. And are there any, I know we have to be very careful with the advice of supplements, just because everyone is different. But, you know, are there some main supplements that do support, I guess, females through these changes, you know, maybe light magnesium, or things that I guess people can look into? Or is it kind of a conversation you have to have with someone more of an individual level?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm all about bio-individuality, because I think you know, sometimes to hit therapeutic doses, you've got to look towards the person and test and look at those things. But yeah, I mean, there are some key things, again, that I think can be really useful. And that is, I mean, magnesium is fantastic. It works on so many different levels. It can help with blood sugar levels. It can help with sleep, because again, it can often, I also like magnesium with taurine, and taurine can help with, there's some research with magnesium and taurine helping with assisting with reducing hot flushes. So that's pretty cool. I
Interesting.
think also like anything you can do to support your HPA axis, which is your hypothalamus pituitary axis, is really key as well, and to support the nervous system. And especially as the brain goes through like this adjustment period with kind of recalibrating with what's happening with hormones, I think that that's really important. So things that I also like are like choline, and you need to look at a dose of greater than 500 milligrams with choline.
Okay.
And I find that, you know, a lot of people come into clinic and they're like, oh man, I'm putting my keys in the freezer, and I'm like taking out the Vegemite and putting it like, you know, putting it in the sink, and then I can't find it, or like I don't know where my phone is, and you know, I don't know, like I forgot X, Y, and Z for my child, or you know, or they're in a work meeting and they just can't find the word. Like that is a big, like that word finding, it becomes problematic. And
Yes.
bless Lara, you know, she's so fabulous, but she said to me, she just again like finds that it's just like it turns a switch back on in the brain. It really can be so
That's
beautiful.
interesting. Yeah, I mean, I had that during pregnancy, and I definitely have that at times as well, where you're just like, I've got no idea what's going on. Like at one stage, I couldn't even remember what the end, like, oh, it was something in the car. I can't even remember what it's now called. But yeah, brain fog is a big one, you know, and I guess.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's also interesting that you say that about pregnancy, because that is a time where actually we do have higher needs of choline as well, for fetal development and things, and for the brain, like the maternal brain. So I do think choline super important, and there is kind of this rewiring that happens like during pregnancy, and this is, you know, a rewiring of the brain also happens in perimenopause and menopause. So the other thing I would say is you know, often pairing glycine with that. Like, so you've got like magnesium, chlorine, and glycine. Again, that's really helpful for sleep. It's really helpful with insulin resistance. Again, you've got to look towards the individual. So, you know, my inositol, let me get my words out properly. If there's sort of like a PCOS type picture or the insulin resistance picture, inositol can be really effective. Again, if the person's really highly stressed, they are showing signs of, you know, really raised high cortisol, and, you know, they're kind of experiencing symptoms of burnout, then again, B vitamins can be super effective.
B6. B's, your zinc, your D, but you'd know all of that from getting your blood work done, and that's why it was so important to, you know, would you do blood work obviously initially to find that out?
Yeah, I mean, I really like, again, like looking at the individual, but sometimes it's like, you know, we try and complicate things with doing a whole lot of extensive blood work, and that can be good, but also sometimes you've got to look at those real micronutrients like iron and zinc and vitamin D, because iron can also lend, like symptomatically, you can have brain fog, you can feel low motivation, you can have no energy, you can be apathetic, you know, you can have symptoms of anxiety and depression and heart palpitations. So, you know, it might just be as simple as kind of having adequate iron stores, because iron will also...
Is that a symptom of heart palpitations, lack of iron?
Can be, yes.
So
yeah. And also, I think with iron, you know, low iron will often lead to heavier periods, which is another thing. And so you end up with a cycle of like low iron, heavier periods, low iron. And so you've got to try and fix that cycle as well, which is really important, because if you don't get on top of that, that's when, you know,
a lot of women who end up getting heavier periods, I hear doctors will put them on the Mirena as a you know, as a way of dealing with that. Do you have any say on anything like that at all, or is that like a little bit, is that for another conversation?
I think, like, you know, there's a lot with that. There's a lot of pros and cons to that. I think if it is helping to avoid a hysterectomy, then for sure, like that is a better approach. I think the thing with the Mirena is you're not having as many hormones, so you're having progestin, but remember that's not progesterone, it's a synthetic form of progesterone. But it can help. It can be helpful with reducing those really heavy menstrual periods. The thing that I do sometimes see in clinic with that is really an increase in things like bacterial vaginosis and
Oh,
thrush.
right.
So it's something to be mindful of with that.
All the fun stuff.
Yeah, but that's not to shame like people's decisions and
No,
making.
I know.
I think if that's your option and that's going to save you from a hysterectomy, then I think for sure
100%, because a hysterectomy is the next big thing, and it can be very challenging. I've had clients who have had hysterectomies, and the recovery and the next process after that. So I think it's really important to know that. I guess we've covered all main aspects of perimenopause. Is there anything you want to finish off by, telling the ladies out there that will inspire them to, look at it all this as not a positive, but just, like what we were saying, aging gracefully, seeing it as part of life? I mean, what would you like to add to that?
I think the biggest takeaway that I have had with working with women going through this transition is just really reassuring everyone that it is a transition phase, that what you're experiencing right now is temporary, and that you will get to the other side of this and be in a better place. The other thing I want to say is it doesn't have to be a shitstorm. Like, you go reach out for help, go and, get some guidance, go and have an open conversation with your GP, go and look at Lara's books, like they're fantastic. The Hormone Repair and the Period Repair Manual, that gives you a lot of guidance. There is stuff on the internet, obviously, you've got to caution that, go look at your exercise, go look at your nutrition, and start with some simple steps. Just start with, drinking water, having protein at breakfast, and doing a little bit of exercise. They can go such a long way to this. And again, I guess I want to say is, it is a privilege, and we are fortunate enough to I want to celebrate the fact that,
we are here and we're alive and we're still going. Absolutely. I totally agree with you.
And that it's not an accelerated, you haven't suddenly advanced in your the aging process as you start to enter perimenopause, and that there are simple strategies available with natural medicine as well that you can use. And again, often this looks like a combined approach with hormone therapy as well, whether that's a little bit of estrogen or a little bit of micronized progesterone. There are things that you can do to make an easier, smoother process.
Where can everyone find you?
Find me. Oh, that's pretty easy. I think it's just ameliastafford.co.nz. So that's, I do virtual and face-to-face consults in Christchurch, but I'm Skyping people, Zooming people kind of in Australia and America and, in New Zealand as well. But I love working with, your program, particularly because I feel like, you really hit it home with nutrition and exercise that can be simple. And I think that's the thing, like we do need to make these things simple and easy to follow for people. But reach out. Like, if you've got a question, feel free to slide a, question.
I'll put all your details on there anyway, so don't worry, everyone will know where you are. Thank you so much, Amelia. It's been so amazing to have you. And ladies, if you have any questions, reach out to Amelia and we can happily answer them. Thank you.
Oh,